Well, the lawsuit against the National Association of Realtors is not quite final yet, but some changes are obviously going to be anticipated. We're going to talk about how that affects you as a home buyer, what it means for agents, and of course, what it means for lending as well. That's coming up. Hello and welcome into the Smart Mortgage Show. Ben George with Bill Litton, Regional President at Cross Country Mortgage. Got a good show for you today. Bill, what's going on?
Hey, Ben. How you doing, man?
I see the pictures back there now. You've added that since our last video. I love the backdrop. Get to see a little bit of the family now.
Yeah, you know what? People are starting to wonder if I had friends and family, and I figured I might as well show them off a little bit. Yes, I have a few friends and family, and so, yeah, very cool. You know, it's interesting because I pass by these pictures during the day, and they make me smile. So it actually is a nice piece of ambiance in here.
Yeah, it's important to have that. I got a couple pictures around the office too, and I never update them enough. I feel like I should update them more because you're making new memories, you're making new trips, you're visiting new places, going to new concerts probably for you. So got to keep them updated. But I like the addition to the backdrop there today. Got a good show. I know we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but the National Association of Realtors is obviously facing a big lawsuit that I think started in 2023. Still carrying over here to 2024. Department of Justice hasn't quite made a final ruling on everything, but we can kind of anticipate what's coming, right?
Yeah, we can. The rule is not final, but most of the meat of the rule has been laid out, and the biggest piece is just that the seller, if they're going to cooperate with a buyer's agent and pay a buyer's agent, they cannot list the commissions in the MLS service, the multiple listing service, because they felt like there was some sort of collusion there or price fixing. And I don't think there would. I mean, I think there was like an understanding of this is just what agents charge, and I think they're trying to get away from that so that the agent needs to negotiate more. But I'll tell you, Ben, in Pennsylvania, we've had buyer's agency for years. This is not going to be a big change in Pennsylvania because agents have been addressing this conversation for a long time. So unless the Department of Justice that is going to weigh in before this rule is final, unless they make a change by saying the seller is not allowed to pay the buyer's agent, okay, that would be a bigger dynamic change. But just having a different conversation with the seller, not that big of a deal in the end. And most of the realtors I know, I've been privy to sit in on many really good meetings with these real estate agents, and they are on top of it. They know how to navigate it. They know how to lead their buyers and their sellers through this new change. So there's a lot of noise about it, but I think in the end we're going to be okay.
Well, I'm kind of curious because you see this process every single day, so you know what's common, what's normal. Hasn't it just become just kind of understood that the seller pays the buyer's agent? Is that just kind of part of the process, or does it get negotiated more often than I realize?
So, Ben, I think you just hit the nail on the head. There was this understanding where the seller, it was almost, and I know that there's a lot of really good realtors that I work with who addressed and discussed that they're paying the buyer's agent. So they understood it. And now they're going to put a law in place that makes that, there's going to be a mechanism in place that makes that conversation have to happen. So they're forcing that conversation so that it's not just understood, so that the seller understands that they have some options. That's going to be the big difference.
And as far as the percentage of commission goes, do you think that'll actually change? I just can't imagine most people will go into this saying, you know what, I can't wait to negotiate with my agent to get that down an extra 0.5% for closing. I mean, it just seems like, I understand the conversation's good and knowing your options are good. That's part of what we do here, is the education aspect of this, so that you know what's available to you. You may never use it. It might not affect you. It might not change anything, but just knowing it's available is important. But to me, I just don't feel like it's going to change the process as a home buyer going in and saying, I'm going to shop around and find that 0.25%, and spend the extra time trying to negotiate that, because the bottom line is a good agent's still worth the money.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the saying of you get what you pay for. You know, when I go to Amazon, I don't just buy the cheapest piece of junk that has a 1-star rating, priced option, but it also has a decent level of quality displayed in the ratings. And with real estate agents, a buyer's agent, they do a lot. And I think what people don't understand as well is if you eliminated all of the realtors, let's just say there was no such thing as a realtor anymore, properties trading in the free and open market the way that they do in the U.S., trading with ease and trust and security is what makes our housing market robust, right? It's the activity of buying and selling. If you had no guidance and you had no idea what you were doing, many people would buy and sell a lot less. Values would be depressed for this 3 to 6% concern that real estate agents make. They'd be depressed far more than that 5%. So it's like if we get rid of the real estate agents, which by the way, that's not what NAR is trying to do. But when an agent, when they talk about their value, there's a lot of value there because the market depends on their expertise to help people through this. It's the largest purchase they'll ever make in their life. It's the largest asset they'll ever own or sell in their life. And they absolutely need good realtor guidance. So back to your question. Yes, you're going to have a few people who watch the news and they start trying to negotiate. I know this question has come up more now that this NAR issue is being, shown on the news and online and people are aware of it. But I think the conversation still goes back to, first of all, nothing's in place yet. But even if it were, it's your choice. You could say, I'm not going to pay a buyer's agent, but you're probably not going to get as many people looking at your house or people that are able to purchase it because look at the closing costs for the buyer. They bring a lot more money to the table than the seller pays in commissions. So it also balances the dynamic to make it possible for buyers to purchase houses because they're bringing way more than the seller is paying out in commission.
It's interesting. I guess it's just one more piece of the offer, right? We talked in a recent podcast about how to make your offer stand out, things you can do to improve your offer so that when competition is heated like it is and has been, that you're able to stand out. Even little things can make a difference. So maybe that's just one more item that becomes part of this process. And maybe I shouldn't assume that people won't negotiate that. Maybe there are more people than I think that will go into that. And maybe you provide that guidance of, hey, have that conversation with someone. Maybe you can get a little bit taken off that. Every dollar, again, in this process, because it's such a big asset, every dollar is going to add up.
Yeah, and Ben, I think you just hit on a really important part. So there are, and don't quote me on this number because I don't know if it's exact, but it's pretty close. There's like 25 items on the agreement of sale that are negotiable. This is going to be number 26. It's just one more item that we need to address. The law is going to make it so that we have to address it. We can't just kind of slide past it. But all the good agents I work with, and I work with so many great realtors that they've already been doing this. So almost nothing changes.
Interesting. All right. Again, if you have questions, 484-352-4151. So let's talk about your spot in this whole process, Bill, the lending portion of this at Cross Country Mortgage. What's going to change? What do you think in the wake of all this, what's going to be different for buyers, or what options might be available or should be worth considering for buyers that maybe they wouldn't have a year or two ago?
So great question. We're not 100% sure yet because the ruling is not final. So we've been working together to kind of come up with, certain tools that are going to be able to help in these situations, but they're hypothetical at the moment because we don't know the full, fallout from this. But for the small percentage of sellers that are not going to pay the buyer's agent's commission, where the buyer has to pay the buyer's agent's commission. So that's an additional 3% for purposes of this conversation that they're going to have to come up with, right? So on a $400,000 house, that's an extra $12,000 to bring to settlement. So that's a serious consideration. As a lender, what we would like to do is come up with some tools that would help them to, if they need to finance that option, how could they finance it? So essentially, we have some tools already that, if you're putting 20% down, we have a no PMI product up to 85% loan to value. So putting as little as 15% down, you don't pick up PMI. So you could just borrow an extra $12,000. Now people say, man, the amount we're paying in commissions, we're going to borrow that over 30 years. Nobody keeps the loan for 30 years. So you're really not going to borrow it over 30 years. If you wanted to, you could pay down a little quicker on the loan until you've paid an extra $12,000 in principal, if that makes you feel better about not rolling that into the loan. But there are going to be tools to make it easy to finance it and then deal with it later through some other ways and other means of expediting the payoff of that commission that you rolled into the financing.
Well, when do you anticipate, Bill, this kind of becoming final and actually having a ruling where everybody, all parties involved, can just move forward?
I think the ruling will be final in May, and it'll go into effect in August.
Okay, so we'll know here pretty soon then. So maybe by our next update, potentially we will have a little bit more to talk about and chew on. But you don't anticipate, I guess, anything big outside of what we kind of expect right now. But I guess anything could happen. The
only really big concern is if it becomes illegal for a seller to pay the buyer's agent's commission, because then we have to always put it on the side of buyer's agent gets paid by the buyer. That has been talked about. I honestly don't think that's going to be the case, but that's the big concern.
Do you think that would affect home prices at all? I mean, if sellers know that the buyer now has to pay potentially, like you said, a $400,000 house, $12,000 in those commission fees that might have been rolled into the seller side now, do you think that affects prices?
I mean, the first thing that I think that could be done to help combat that issue, because again, balancing the closing cost piece, like the buyer pays this much, the seller pays this much, and actually the buyer also has to bring the down money. So like, you're trying to shoulder the costs in a somewhat even way to allow people to transact. So let's just say that they say, hey, now seller is not allowed to pay the buyer's agent's commission, the buyer has to pay it. Well, me personally, the first thing I would do is say, okay, well, the transfer tax paid by the buyer is usually 1%, and the title fees are usually 1%. So I'm going to structure my offer so that the seller has to pay that 2%, and now all we need to make up is 0.5% to 1%. So there's going to be ways, and there will be ways to structure this so that we can transact and still buy and sell real estate with ease.
Yeah. I know that as a buyer, you just want to know kind of what that final number is. You don't care what's happening underneath the surface, right? To get there, it all works out on its own. So yeah, it'll just be a little more creative math to get to that final number potentially, but something to keep an eye on. Again, we'll update you here on the YouTube channel or on podcast. If you're listening there, come join us on YouTube as well. We'll have more updates as this becomes final and talk about what it means for you as a buyer and seller, and also how it affects the lending process as well. Again, if you have questions for Bill at Cross Country Mortgage, you can get in touch, 484-352-4151, or online at smartmortgageshow.com. Very interesting, Bill. Thanks for kind of the update on this and filling us in a little bit more. I know I learned a little bit today, so I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
This program is for informational purposes only. Please consult a qualified professional before taking any action. Bill Litton is a loan advisor and regional president with Cross Country Mortgage, NMLS number 147060.